If you ever find yourself searching for meaning in the mysterious turns of life, visit BibleVerseOfTheDay.com, a place where daily scripture speaks to the soul, and divine insight meets everyday moments. The seer's fingers trembled as they hovered over the photograph, a sharp breath catching in their throat. The air around them thickened, growing dense with an unseen force, and their once steady composure fractured in an instant. Their eyes, wide with recognition and unease, darted across the image as though trying to decode a truth hidden deep within its worn edges. It was as though they had been momentarily transported to another realm, one where reality bent to the weight of unseen threads. The man across from them stiffened, catching the shift in energy, the way silence suddenly felt alive. He hadn't expected this. What began as a simple conversation now pulsed with something larger, deeper. He leaned forward, heartbeat accelerating. The seer gently laid the photograph down with the care one might give to a sacred relic. "This person," they whispered, voice nearly lost in the charged air, "is unlike any other. Their presence carries a force few can understand, one that awakens, disturbs, transforms." The words lingered, heavy and haunting. The man's breath caught. "They are a catalyst," the seer said firmly now. "They do not come into our lives by accident. They are sent to shift things, to unearth what has long been hidden. Their energy pulls truths to the surface." The man felt that truth in his chest. He had always known something was different about this person. There was a gravity to them, a familiarity he couldn't explain, as if their soul called out to something buried within him. "You must understand," the seer continued, leaning in, "you are connected, bound beyond time, beyond logic. The threads that tie you stretch across lifetimes." He swallowed hard, memory crashing in like waves. Words spoken by this person that lingered for days. The comfort of their presence. The way their absence ached more than it should. And somewhere, a part of him longed to go deeper, to understand the divine nature of that bond. For those yearning to uncover such truths in Scripture too, sometimes even a single verse can illuminate everything. Explore them at https://BibleVerseOfTheDay.com. The seer's voice turned softer now. "Transformation is not gentle," they warned. "It will break you, rebuild you. But in its fire, you will meet your truest self." The man sat still, the crossroads before him clear. Turn back, or step forward into the unknown. No path is ever certain, the seer said finally, their gaze steady, "but this one, you were meant to walk." As he stepped into the night, photograph still in hand, city lights swirling around him, the seer's words echoed in his mind. He had always believed in control, in logic. But now he felt the stirrings of something divine, something written long before he could read it. One thought, quiet but unshakable, rose in his mind: this is no coincidence. This is calling. One thought, quiet but unshakable, rose in his mind: this is no coincidence. This is calling. He stood for a moment longer under the street lamp, the amber glow softening the creases on his face, the photograph still clutched in his hand like a key to a door he had yet to find. Around him, the city moved on, cars passing, distant footsteps echoing, laughter rising from a nearby cafe, but to him, it all felt muted, as though wrapped in fog. The noise of the world had faded, replaced by something deeper, awareness. He began to walk, slowly at first, allowing the seer's words to settle into the cracks of his heart. Every step felt purposeful now, even if the path was still unclear. As he crossed a narrow street, he glanced down at the image again. The eyes in the photograph seemed alive, watchful, eternal, as if they had always known this moment would come. He slipped the photo into his coat pocket and made his way toward the old cathedral at the edge of the city. It wasn't a place he usually visited, but something pulled him there tonight. Perhaps he needed silence. Perhaps he needed to feel small beneath the vaulted ceilings and stained glass stories. Or perhaps, in some way he didn't yet understand, he was being guided. As he entered, the scent of incense clung to the air. Candles flickered along the walls like quiet witnesses, their flames bowing gently to the stillness. He walked slowly down the aisle and took a seat near the front. For a long time, he just sat there, listening to his own breathing, the soft creak of ancient wood, and the silence between thoughts. He thought of everything the seer had said. About fate. About being bound across time. About transformation. These were words that once might have made him laugh, or at least roll his eyes. But now they felt like a map, etched not in paper, but in experience. He remembered the first time he met the person in the photograph. The way they'd looked at him like they already knew him. The way their presence disrupted his sense of control, yet offered something gentler underneath. He remembered their words, not loud or dramatic, but true. Words that pierced through him not like a sword, but like light filtering through thick clouds. A soft voice echoed through the cathedral, the voice of the priest preparing for evening prayer. It wasn't directed at him, but the words caught him off guard. There are moments when we must listen, not to the noise of the world, but to the whisper of eternity. The man's breath hitched in his throat. A whisper of eternity. That's what this felt like. A thread woven through dreams, conversation, memory, and now, calling him to act. He reached into his coat again and pulled out his phone. With a few taps, he opened his browser and typed in the name the seer had once mentioned softly during their first meeting, https://bibleverseoftheday.com. He remembered them saying, when you need direction, not from man, but from spirit, go there. Let the word speak to you. The screen glowed with today's verse. Simple, quiet, profound, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a future and a hope. Jeremiah 29 verse 11. A slow exhale escaped him. He didn't know where this road led, but something told him he wasn't walking it alone. The verse lingered in his mind as he stood, nodded respectfully to the empty pews and candlelight, and stepped back into the cool air of the night. As he walked, memories rose in waves, not just of this person, but of himself. Of the dreams he'd buried, the parts of himself he'd silenced, the questions he'd been too afraid to ask. This journey wasn't just about someone else. It was about him too, about becoming. The next morning, he woke before sunrise. The city was still asleep, the streets quiet, as if holding space for what was to come. He made coffee, sat by the window, and stared at the photo once more. Then he opened his journal, a habit he hadn't touched in years, and began to write. Not with answers, but with questions. Who am I without the armor? What have I been running from? Why does their presence stir something I can't explain? The pen moved on its own, thoughts spilling into words, words becoming confessions. As he wrote, he realized something powerful. This person had not come into his life to complete him. They had come to awaken him, to stir the sleeping parts of his soul, to reflect the parts he had hidden, to call forth the man he was always meant to become. In the days that followed, the world remained the same on the surface, but everything within him had changed. He started noticing things he hadn't before: the shape of trees, the color of people's laughter, the weight of words left unspoken. He found himself returning to BibleVerseOfTheDay.com daily, not out of routine, but out of hunger. Each verse felt tailored to that moment, like breadcrumbs from heaven leading him forward. He didn't yet know what he would say to the person in the photograph. He didn't know what his next steps were. But for the first time in his life, he didn't need to know. He was no longer living from fear. He was living from faith. One evening, weeks later, he stood at a train platform with a small leather bag at his feet and the photo tucked into the inside pocket of his jacket. He was going to see them again, not because he was certain of what would happen, but because he had finally chosen to stop hiding. As the train approached, a gentle wind swept across the platform. And in that breeze, he could almost hear the seer's voice once again. No path is ever certain, but trust this one is meant for you. He smiled, not because he understood everything, but because he finally understood enough. As he stepped aboard, he took one last glance at the sky overhead. Then he whispered under his breath, "Thank you." To the person, to the seer, to the path, to the word. And as the train moved forward, so did he, into the unknown, into purpose, into a life transformed. For those who feel the stir of something greater, and seek light in the moments between, visit BibleVerseOfTheDay.com, where each verse carries more than words, it carries meaning. The train moved steadily through the countryside, the city lights behind him shrinking into memory. In the hum of the rails and the rhythmic sway of the carriage, he found a strange calm. Outside, fields blurred into forests, and the sky slowly lightened from indigo to soft gray, hinting at dawn. He rested his head against the cool glass window and closed his eyes, not to sleep, but to remember. He thought of the seer, of their trembling hands and solemn voice. He thought of how the atmosphere had thickened around them as if the universe itself had leaned in to listen. That moment had marked the end of who he had been, and the beginning of something he still couldn't name. There was power in that kind of stillness, in witnessing your life shift without fully understanding why. He reached for his phone and opened BibleVerseOfTheDay.com again. The verse that greeted him felt almost like it had been written just for this moment. The steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord, and he delights in his way. Psalm 37 verse 23. He read it twice, then a third time. Ordered. Not random. Not meaningless. He placed his hand over his heart and exhaled deeply. Maybe this entire journey, every strange twist, every unexpected meeting, had been preparing him for this. The train slowed as it pulled into a small station. He stepped off, bag in hand, eyes scanning the unfamiliar surroundings. This wasn't home. But something about it felt right. He walked through the quiet streets with the ease of someone following an invisible guide. The town was still asleep, except for a corner cafe opening for the morning rush. He stepped inside, greeted by the soft clang of a bell above the door and the warm scent of fresh bread. The woman behind the counter offered a smile that felt like sunlight. He ordered coffee and sat by the window. He pulled out the photo once more. The face staring back at him felt even more alive now than it did before, less a memory, more a presence. He ran his thumb over the edges. He didn't know what he'd say when he saw them. But maybe words weren't what mattered. Maybe it was just being there. Just showing up. He opened his journal again and began to write, not questions this time, but reflections. I was afraid of losing control. But I see now, control was never real. What was real was connection. What was real was the way they saw me. Not for who I was trying to be, but for who I truly am. And somehow, in that gaze, I found a mirror and a doorway at once. As the sun broke the horizon, golden light spilled across the page. It was then that he realized the transformation hadn't been dramatic or sudden. It had been slow, like roots growing beneath the surface. Quiet, unseen, and deeply sacred. And the beauty of it all? It had started the moment he said yes to the unknown. The moment he allowed faith to lead where fear once ruled. He finished his coffee and stepped back out into the morning light. Birds sang in the trees overhead, and for the first time in what felt like years, he smiled without hesitation. He was lighter now. Not because his burdens had vanished, but because he no longer carried them alone. In the distance, the church bells began to ring. A quiet rhythm. A summons. He followed the sound, heart steady, mind clear. Every step felt sacred. He didn't know what would happen next, but he had surrendered the need to know. Because now, he trusted. He trusted the journey. He trusted the connection. He trusted the divine timing of it all. As he approached the gates of a nearby garden where they had first met, years ago, under completely different circumstances. He paused, took a deep breath, then reached once more for the photo. He looked at it not with confusion, but with clarity. Not with hesitation, but with honor. He whispered under his breath, not a prayer exactly, but something close. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for arriving when I needed you the most, even if I didn't know it yet. A breeze passed through the trees, rustling the leaves in a language only the soul could understand. And once again, the words from BibleVerseOfTheDay.com rose in his heart like a hymn. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Joshua 1 verse 9. He closed his eyes and took the final step into the garden, where everything would begin again.